And good evening, and welcome to another edition of Sports Corner. My name is Ralph Williams. Those of you who are new to the show, we're here live every Tuesday evening. Tonight we had to move the show up to 9:30. My special guest right now is Craig Meyer from the Post Gazette. Craig, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. Craig, I understand Lance White and the Pitts girls women's basketball team are hot on the recruiting trail here. Can you give our viewers a little bit of a piece of that?
For sure. Yeah. They have added, at least for now, I think they still have a couple open spots, or one or two at least. They have added 5 players for next season. It's a group. There are 3 freshmen, 2 transfers in that group. The freshmen, pretty highly touted. One of them is the top 100 recruit, Aislinn Malcolm, who plays locally in Pittsburgh at Chartiers Valley. Then they've got a couple players, Avery Strickland, who's from down in Tennessee, and then they've got a third player who's the 2-time West Virginia Player of the Year. So it is certainly a promising group of freshmen. I think they add that too. There are 2 transfers they've got: Gabby Hutcherson from Ohio State and Shanice Lewis from Maryland. Both of them were former top 60 recruits coming out of high school. Played for Big Ten programs, just kind of encountered some bad luck, some injuries, just general disappointment over the course of their college career. But I mean, they're both players who possess talent, who possess a level of experience for them. And in Hutcherson's case, especially, I want to say I think she's 6'2". She was a 5-star recruit, number 12 player in her class in the 2020 class. So for those two, it's a chance to kind of restart their careers. And I think for Pitt, that could be a very good thing.
Well, that's great. Hold on, we have some comments here in the comments section. Juana says hello to myself and you in the comments section. You're welcome to put your comments. My guest tonight is Craig Meyer from the Post Gazette, and we're talking Pitt women's basketball. And if I can ask Craig to stay, we have some other sports we want to talk about if he's interested in staying on board here. We can get his opinion about other things. Craig, you were talking about the transfers, Gabby Hutchison and Shanice Lewis. What other players on the team? Tell the viewers what else on the other teams. I mean, other players on the team that they need to look for.
Yeah, I mean, they have really, when you look at what they've got coming back, there are 3 players who really stand out. You've got Daishanette Harris, who's a point guard for him. She's been there a while. She's been kind of a stalwart of Lance White's tenure there at Pitt. She's somewhat an inexperienced player. I'll be interested to see how her role potentially changes with Shanice Lewis in there now, because Lance White was saying that's a big thing that they really wanted. They wanted this offseason kind of a true point guard. He feels like he got that with Lewis. So you may see lineups where the two of them play together at sometimes. Maybe there are times where Lewis is on the court and Harris is on the bench. But you also have Amber Brown, who's who's a wing for him. She's, again, been kind of she's been a player that's been in that program for several years now. Has been a reliable and productive player for him. And then maybe the most intriguing player of that group is Aaliyah King. She's very early. She's very early in her career there at Pitt. Really, really, really good rebounder, really instinctive player. A pretty valuable post presence for him. So those among the returners are probably the 3 names to really know.
Okay, we're live here on YouTube and Facebook. My guest, Craig Meyer from the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. It's great to have him aboard here. We're talking Pitt women's basketball right now. One other thing, Craig, has Lance White experienced the transfer portal bugaboo, and his tenure so far hasn't gone well, except for last season. Seemed that they started winning this past season. And I know they only won 2 games in the entire ACC, but at least they won some non-conference games to help their record a little bit. What's your thoughts on Lance White as a coach?
I think the results so far have been Really not even that mixed. I think it's been a disappointing tenure for him. I mean, he's gone 32 and 79 overall. I'll have to double check the mark here in ACC play. He's 8 and 59 in ACC play. Like, he didn't take over a good situation. I mean, there was a lot that, a lot made of the situation that Jeff Capel took over on the men's side, taking over for a program that went winless in ACC play the year before his arrival. The women's basketball program wasn't in as bad of shape, but Lance White took over that program in like mid to late April. So that's pretty late during the recruiting cycle. So unlike Jeff Capel, he was sort of beholden to the roster that he took over. He wasn't able to add freshmen or to add transfers in that during those first several weeks. The opportunities for him to reshape that roster just weren't as plentiful. So I think it's been disappointing for him. It's kind of a now or never time for him. I mean, I thought that there was some possibility that he may not have survived this past season. So I think at this point, and so, kind of like Jeff Capel, I think he's going to be coaching for his job. But
Yeah, I heard
I
this
guess
is.
unlike on the men's.
Yeah, we'll talk about the men's later a little bit, and I want to ask you some questions about Jeff Capel. But first of all, with Lance White, we knew coming in that he was a very good recruiter down in Florida State. But it's one thing to be able to recruit, but the question was his coaching ability. And my thoughts are, you can always recruit, but you can't coach, and then but sometimes you can coach, but you can't recruit. And if you can't recruit, you need to get somebody that can. And I understand that Lance White was known as a recruiter, but he should have brought somebody else in to try to help him with the recruiting so he can coach. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think he's certainly more known as a recruiter than strictly an X's and O's coach. When you meet him, it's easy to tell why he's a good recruiter. He's a very friendly guy, very affable guy, very outgoing. He's got a magnetic personality. As far as X's and O's go, I mean, he actually delegates a decent amount to his assistant coaches, Terry Mitchell in particular, who's a former Division I coach. So there is a lot actually placed on her as far as in-game adjustments, more strategic elements of the game and of planning for those games. So he's someone who's kind of had to grow into being, he was a first-time head coach here. You could kind of see Heather Light's preference for hires between him or between Lance White, between Jeff Capel, Mike Bell, the head baseball coach at Pitt, where she likes to get top assistants from really good programs, preferably within the ACC. But he's someone, this was his first job, so he's kind of had to learn a little bit on the job. And I think that there are still some things where I think like a lot of coaches do, where he delegates, where it's like, hey, this is a bit of a weak point for me, so I'm going to need you to focus a little bit more on that. And I think even 4 years in, they're still kind of at that point.
Okay, Craig, I have a tough question for you here. What was your thoughts on what happened to the collapse of this program, the women's program, when Susie McConnell Ciro was coaching? What happened there? I thought she would bring this program up to par because of her past abilities at Duquesne and her high school coaching and her NBA and her WNBA coaching, and then all of a sudden come to find out she laid an egg at Pitt. What happened there?
Yeah, that was a pretty stunning collapse there. Like that's kind of one reason why I almost give up on evaluating hires when they happen, because everything about her said that she was going to be a successor. Where
Yeah.
she's a huge name in this region. I mean, she's a former WNBA Coach of the Year. She's played at the highest levels, been around the game at the highest level. She has a name that really resonates in the region. She did a great job as a college head coach at Duquesne, which you think like the
Right. Yeah.
ACC and Pitt is a bit of a step up, but and she did really well early. I mean, her second year they went to the NCAA tournament, won a game there, and things seem to be looking up there quite a bit. I mean, I know personally she rubbed some people the wrong way there. I know that especially toward the end, her recruiting fell off a bit. Um, those are probably, I think, if I was to pick out a couple things, those would probably be the two biggest ones.
Yeah, I knew Agnes Baronato, and I thought she was a great coach. We went to that tournament game. The women's team went to the tournament game against Tennessee that time, and I actually thought she was going to do well. And then all of a sudden, she had a collapse. So it seems like that seems to be an ongoing problem with the women's program. I'm hoping things get better with Lance White, or else maybe we're going to have to make a change again. And like you said, it's tough to cover these teams with this coaching carousel. It really is. And I'm hoping that we can get both programs can get going so that we can keep these coaches here and get some stability and keep these kids here as well. Because a lot of these kids, transferring in and out with this transfer portal, it's like musical chairs. You just can't figure out what's going on until it happens. And then, so how about the men's team a little bit, Craig? I want to get your thoughts on Jeff Capel. He has a whole new team again this year. He's had to do this again for 2 years in a row. Is he kind of worn out by doing this, or what's going on with him?
I don't necessarily know that he's worn out. I think a lot of college basketball coaches now accept this as kind of, it's kind of the reality of the profession in 2022, where you have to re-recruit your roster every year, where there's going to be turnover. Where, I mean, previously, like there would be cases where if three guys left, like that would set off like sirens and all kinds of alarms, where that would be like considered almost a like mass exodus. So right now, I mean, I think that they've gotten acclimated to it. They certainly don't. They certainly don't like it. But I do think that there were seasons, like I think Capel's third season, he got worn out by that team, where there was a lot of internal friction within that group. He had to deal with managing a lot of, I guess egos and friction there, and some discontent. And like that was one thing going into last season, where he seemed, despite it being obviously a worse roster, where he seemed kind of excited about coaching that team, where he's like, man, I can't tell you like what a relief it is to have a group of guys who like being around each other, who don't care about stats quite as much. And I think last season, as difficult as it was, I think that, he would certainly rather win more games, but it doesn't make I guess at least on paper, it doesn't make much sense. But like where I think it was probably more enjoyable for him going 11, going 11-21 than it was going 10-12 with that 2020-2021 team. Yeah, it really just hasn't worked out for him though. I mean, that's another one. I never thought he was going to get them back to where Pitt was under Jamie Dixon and Ben Howland. I don't ever know if the program's going to get back to that point. But I thought that he would have him in a spot where you're 4 years in, you knew it was a big rebuild. I thought at the very least they would have had some kind of postseason berth by now, even if it's just the NIT. And he had a couple teams that his second and third teams at Pitt, like as of like early February, were in NCAA tournament conversations, and they just fell apart late. And that's been a defining quality or a defining characteristic of his teams over each of his 4 years. A little bit less so last year. That was just a bad team that fell apart late, like in their final 4 games when the competition ramped up. But those previous 3 years, I mean, there's a pretty clear line of where things are going well and then to where they fall apart.
Thank you. We have Craig Meyer on with us here on Sports Corner tonight. We start a little later so we can get Craig on the show. Plus, I was on a national show earlier, and so that's why we had to start late tonight. But we have some comments here, very informative and nice. And Susie has joined us here as a new comment, and she says, hey. So here we are, comment section wide open. Come on in with your comments. I am Ralph Williams. This is Sports Corner. We're here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, live on YouTube and Facebook. Craig, tell me, is this the last season for Jeff Capel and his contract?
It is not, no. So his contract actually goes through the 2026-2027 season. So I always forget where we are now, but it's so after next season he will have 4 or 5, 6. He'll have 4 years left after next season's over with.
Right. I heard he has a $15 million buyout clause. Is that true, or is that just false?
So I had heard something similar, where to buy him out after this past year, it would have cost $15 million, and then next year it drops down to $5. I've heard varying things on that, where I've had some people tell me who I trust that that contract is guaranteed. So you just multiply his annual salary, which based on the most recent figures was a little over 3.5 million by the number of years left on the deal. So he'll have 4 years left after next year. If that's the case, you're looking at a $14 million buyout.
Okay.
You can always negotiate those things down. And, the problem is there just really hasn't been great information on this. If laws were different in the state of Pennsylvania, we could file an open records request and actually see the contract. But yeah, no, it's that his buyout was the biggest reason that there was not a change made last year. Because I think if it were manageable or financially doable for Pitt, I think he would be gone, or he would have been gone after last year.
What do you think his longevity is? I mean, I understand that this contract goes all the way to 27 with that buyout. Do you think Heather Lake's going to lose her patience and he's going to be gone in the next year or two?
I think it's very possible, especially if things continue on the trajectory. I don't know why trajectory is a hard word sometimes, but if they continue that way, I mean, where you go 11-20 in your fourth season, that's your fourth straight sub 500 season at Pitt. If you go back to his final 2 years at Oklahoma, he's had six straight losing seasons. That's maybe not fair to dip back 10 years into his past, but if it's almost unheard of for a college coach in a major conference to go 5 years with a losing record in each of those years and keep your job. So I
And
think that if next season, unless there's pretty notable improvement with them, unless they're over 500 and maybe in contention for a postseason berth, there's a part of me that has trouble seeing him surviving past that year.
Okay, we're in 808 Studios here in the Allentown section of the city of Pittsburgh. My name is Ralph Williams. This is Sports Corner. For your first time viewer, welcome. My guest is Craig Meyer from the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. He handles the beat for the Pitt Panther Athletics. And we were talking about women's and men's basketball programs. Craig, let's talk a little bit about the football program a little bit in this Jordan Addison situation. Do you think Pat Narduzzi and Pitt got caught with their pants down with this? Or did Narduzzi have any information about what was going on here, or did he just get caught off guard?
I think he knew the teams were after Addison. Like, that's a new reality that football coaches have to deal with too. Like, basketball coaches usually don't try to, I guess, tamper too much. There's almost kind of a code between basketball coaches that, like, once a player commits, you don't really go after him. Football, you see it all the time where a player commits to a school and they're still taking visits, they're still getting scholarship offers. Where, I mean, he's talked before about where schools, he had brought up Notre Dame trying to get Kenny Pickett last year, where it's like, these guys, like, if you have a player on your roster, a good player, that you'll have a bigger program that'll come around and basically be like, oh, that's a nice quarterback you have. It'd be a shame if you lost him. Like, where that's sort of what they have to deal with. And with Addison coming off the season that he had, I think that's some that I think Narduzzi's had to fend off potential suitors and try to keep him happy and give him reassurances. So I don't think he was entirely caught off guard by it, but I also do think that once you got to that point where he's playing in spring practice, where you're a week away from the transfer portal deadline, where there probably, understandably, would be some sort of peace of mind and some sort of assurance, at least to yourself, that this guy's probably coming back. So I think that I don't want to say he was caught off guard, but I do think that there was probably some sense that once you got that far into the calendar, that there was probably a reasonable chance that he would be coming back. But at this point, I'd be stunned if he is. I mean, they've talked about Pitt being a viable option for him, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, there you go. My next question to you about the football program is: do you think that uh, the Kenny Pickett not being on a team sort of influenced Jordan Addison on?
I think that definitely plays a role. Where he's looking at his situation now, where he's like, where I've got a new he's got a new wide receivers coach. He'd be his third wide receivers coach in his 3 seasons there. He's got a new offensive coordinator. And like Frank Signetti is a guy who, if I were Addison, I would be excited to have, because the whole Signet's whole MO, his whole reputation is that he gets balls to playmakers a lot. Like he doesn't have these concerns about, okay, I need a balanced offense for the sake of having. He's like, no, if I've got some dudes, I'm going to get them the ball. And then you've got a new quarterback, which I think is probably the biggest variable there. So if you get into a situation where, your success and your potential future livelihood is, where you play that position and like you're dependent on your quarterback getting you the ball. Where I think if there are reservations about the quarterback and that new system and all those changes sort of converging, I think that played a factor. Where he has the possibility now to go to Alabama, where he could play with the reigning Heisman Trophy winner in an offense where you watch those games and those guys are wide open. Like they put up just cartoonish stats. For him, like it's been brought up, like, oh, well, he's looking out for his pro career. I don't buy that quite as much, just because all these mocks I see now. Granted, you're 11 and a half months out from the actual draft, but most of these mock drafts I see, he's a top 15 pick. Like there would have to be some pretty cataclysmic for his stock to drop that much. In Pitt State, you can say what you will about the Pitt football program and what's been most of the past 40 years, but they produce pros.
Yes, they do. Yes.
Especially pro wideouts too,
Yeah.
from
I
Larry
haven't seen
Fitzgerald
this
to,
much pros since Wannstedt. Wannstedt used to put out a lot of pros when he was here, and I still wish Dave was here as our coach. I think he would have been here as long as Joe Paterno. He loved the Pitt program. He was a good salesman. He was good at recruiting, and he brought in the right coaches, to coach. And this is Signetti's second go round here. He was here with Wannstedt. What's your thoughts on Signetti and this and him being the offensive coordinator again?
it seemed like a good hire. Like I certainly think that maybe a more cynical person can maybe peg it as being a retread hire, but I think it's someone who has familiarity with this program, with this region. He's done a nice job in previous stops. He did a nice job when he was the coordinator here previously. He did a good job up at Boston College, where he coaches a
Yeah.
Pittsburgh guy in Phil Dracovic, like who, playing in Signe's offense, the guy who he's talked about next year as a potential first round, second round pick. So I thought it was a good hire. I don't think losing Mark Whipple was really that catastrophic. I mean, I think
No.
that,
Mm-mm.
his offense, I mean, the first 2 years their Pitt fans wanted him gone. I mean, I think that he had a good relationship and a good rapport with Kenny Pickett, but part of me wonders how much of that offense was or how much of that success was predicated on Pickett and Addison and having players like that, as opposed to it strictly being Whipple's scheme and his system.
I think that he spent too much time, Craig, being cute, pass happy. I was not happy with his offense. So his play calling was horrible. I mean, there were some games where I saw, that some of his play calls that just were just out of control. And then this pass happy stuff in the running game wasn't even there at times. And these were the coming seasons. And then I didn't like the way he left the program. He said his wife was sick, he had to leave, and then all of a sudden he ends up in Nebraska. Then he's trying to recruit this Purdy quarterback from South Florida area, and then all of a sudden that kid ends up in Nebraska, and he's at Nebraska's offensive coordinator working for Scott Frost. So I'm like, what's going on here with this guy? And then all of a sudden, I lost total respect for Mark Whipple after he did all that, and then he didn't even bother to coach in the bowl game. And then I heard there was some friction between him and Narduzzi. I heard Narduzzi has issues with his offensive staff all the time, a little bit. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's stories that I got. And I'm just wondering if Narduzzi's a hard man to work for and he's too pushy or whatever with the offense. If that's the situation, I don't see Signetti lasting past one season.
I think Pat can be a difficult guy to work with sometimes. He's very hard headed, very stubborn. But I do think, at least offensively, that he sort of recognizes that's a little bit more of a blind spot for him. He knows that he is a defensive guy. He's very on top of that. Where I think the offensive coaches, he gives a little bit more free reign, a little bit more autonomy to kind of do what they do. Like, I mean, there are certainly situations where if things aren't working out, he's not hesitant to make a change. You saw that with Sean Watson, who was there in 20, excuse me,
Oh,
in
that was
2017
terrible.
and 2018, where
Yeah.
Pitt won the ACC Coastal Division Championship, but the offense was incredibly one dimensional. It fell apart late during that season, and he recognized that there was time, that there was time for a change, or that he has a promising young quarterback, and having a subpar offensive coordinator was really hindering his development. So I think that he's willing to make changes, but he can be, there can be a little bit of a friction with a guy like that with Narduzzi, who's very much a my way or the highway type guy. But at least with his offensive staff, he's a little bit more hands off typically.
Right. Okay. My next question to you, Craig, is what's your thoughts on Kenny Pickett getting drafted in the first round? And do you think he'll do okay with the Steelers, or what's your thoughts?
Not entirely sure how he'll do. I really have a hard time envisioning him being a bust, simply because he's a guy who, and you heard it a lot in the draft analysis of him. He's kind of a high floor guy. Some people question his ceiling, but he's someone who possesses a whole bunch of the traits, a whole bunch of the intangibles that you want to see from a successful NFL quarterback. I think going to the Steelers is interesting. I mean, you're going to a place right next door to where to where he spent the past 5 years, and it's somewhere where he's very familiar with. Doesn't have to adapt to a new city. I mean, doesn't really even have to adapt to things like a new practice facility or a new area of town. Like, I am intrigued though. I don't know how soon that he will start for him. I mean, that's one thing when you sign a guy like Mitch Trubisky. He's pretty much there to be a stopgap. But I mean, if he comes out and he plays well, like Kenny Pickett may have what amounts to in the NFL a bit of a redshirt year. And I think that he's well equipped to deal with the pressure too. Like, I think that there's a lot that comes with being drafted by the Steelers, especially given the historical context where this is the franchise. I mean, things aren't identical because Kenny's not from Pittsburgh, but where this is the franchise in 1983
Dan Marino, yeah.
on Dan Marino,
I
like the
sat
local
there and watched
hero.
it, Craig. I know. Yeah. Yeah,
And
I sat there and
I
watched that.
whatever I think pressure there is for rectifying a 40-year-old mistake. um, I think that's saying, I mean, that's a whole lot to put on someone's shoulders. I frankly don't know how much people do it, or if it's more people like me who write about this, who kind of make those historical connections. But I think that he's someone who is well equipped to handle pressure and living in that sort of a kind, in that kind of pressure cooker.
Craig, thanks for coming on. If you'd like, would you like to stay on and talk some more with me, or do you need to? Do you have other obligations?
Oh no, I can stay on a little bit longer.
Okay, great, terrific. What's your thoughts on the Steelers right now? We're going to get into the Steelers a little bit. What's your thoughts on this GM search? I know they're doing their due diligence. They have some second interviews that they're doing right now. Do you think that they waited too long, or do you think that that what they did, having Colbert do this last draft and then go in and hire a new GM, was appropriate?
I think that the way that they handled it timeline wise was good, just because it's so difficult for a GM to jump into handling the draft process that late. Where that front office and that GM specifically have been working on evaluating those players for years. I mean, for really years. I mean, but very intently for like 11 months. So you don't want to have somebody come in who has to kind of cram all of that into a period of 3 months basically. So I thought that they did the right thing, having Colbert stay on through the draft. I think that's what's maybe pushed things back a little bit here. As far as candidates, I mean, it seems like there are some appealing options out there. Um, you've seen some of the names of the guys who they've given second interviews to. I mean, there are people who, based on some of his based on some of his comments, is when he was the commencement speaker at Pitt. There were some people who were kind of reading the tea leaves, had been being like, "Oh, is Louis Riddick going to be the Steelers GM?" So, it seems like they've got a decent pool of candidates. It's the Steelers, with the way that they operate, there is sort of an organizational trust there where, as far as coaching hires go, as far as GMs go, there hasn't been a whole lot of turnover. There haven't been many disastrous hires. I know it's a stark contrast to teams within that division. I guess more, with Cleveland and Cincinnati, although things are obviously changing down there in Cincinnati. But I think that they've earned certainly a benefit of the doubt when it comes to picking people in these high level positions.
What's your thoughts on the Steeler draft as a whole? A lot of people are giving them D minuses and D's, and they're saying it was a bad draft, except for Kenny Pickett and maybe Cam's brother, more or less. Do you think they accomplished anything in this draft, or do you think that, like, where was the offensive lineman that we needed help with? Where was the defensive tackles, except for the one we drafted, in the third round? Do you think this was some folks are saying this was a Matt Canada draft. Do you believe that?
I could a little bit. I think you see players like Pickett, who had Matt Canada stayed at Pitt 1 year more, would have coached Kenny Pickett. I think when you see players like him, when you see that the wideout that they drafted from Memphis, who's got like track star speed,
Oh
um,
yeah,
I
yeah.
I think that you can see Matt Canada's fingerprints on that a bit. But I think overall that they did a good job. I mean, Pickett, if you really believe that's the guy, I mean, you got him at 20. It wasn't like you had to trade up and trade all of these assets to get to a guy who would have been there anyway. I mean, there is an argument where they could have traded back and acquired more and still gotten him, because another quarterback. I mean, I forgot when the next quarterback in the draft didn't go until the third round. So I mean,
Yeah.
they could have gone back, but that's a bit of a dangerous game, and that's easy to kind of armchair quarterback a bit. Pickens, the wideout from Georgia, I love, man. I think that guy's a dog. Like,
Oh, he
I think that
blocks
you
like
need guys
Heinz
like him.
Ward, Craig, and I mean I think he's the next Heinz Ward, except for the fact that he didn't play quarterback in college. But believe me, I think you're going to see a whole lot more of Matt Canada's offense in this year, because now he can't use the excuse that I had to rectify or I had to change up the offense because of Ben. Ben's not here now. So Craig, I think that the that Matt Canada is really going to have to show what he can do as an offensive coordinator in the NFL as compared to college, and he's going to have to put it all out there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on him going into this season here, where you have a quarterback who I know, he's certainly not a Lamar Jackson, but you've got a pretty mobile quarterback, a guy who can make plays with his feet. Obviously, didn't have that last season. Ben Roethlisberger is a legendary player, but frankly, I think I probably could have beaten him in like a 40-yard dash at times last year. But you've got, I guess you've got guys that better fit into his system. So if the offense doesn't do well, you don't really have excuses at the ready there. So I think that there will be a decent amount of pressure on him. I mean, and the thing too is, if you look back, at Canada's resume, I mean, he's a fairly well regarded coordinator and coach. But I mean, he flamed out. He flamed out at LSU. I mean, he's had other stops where he was only there for so long. I mean, that's been the story of his career, really. He's a guy who's typically not somewhere longer than like 2 or 3 years. So if things don't go quite well this season, if he and Pickett don't gel that much, if the offense doesn't produce as much as people think that it should, because you know this is a team that I don't necessarily know if they're one of the top Super Bowl contenders, but I think this is a team that last year with some obvious flaws made the playoffs. Like, so this is a team, given some of the pieces they have, that is built at least to make the postseason and potentially win a game there. So I think that if they fall short of those goals, you're going to probably see some heads rolling. I think a guy like Ken, if the offense if it doesn't perform as well as people think that it should, I think that he'd be a potentially easy scapegoat.
Okay. Well, one other thing I wanted to ask you too was, um, do you think that the Steelers are pretty much needed to? Did they need to get any more offensive linemen, or are you satisfied with Mason Cole and with James Daniels as their free agents, and then whatever they have on the staff now or on the team now for the offensive line?
I mean, that was one of the biggest, I guess, more obvious holes going into the draft, certainly going into this offseason. I guess the hope is that they maybe don't think that they need to add too much because they've got some young pieces on that line. So it's like, well, the guy that you saw last year is going to develop. He's going to be better. And we had seen that previously. We had seen where they had guys like David DeCastro and Pouncey, where they allowed those guys to kind of grow into those roles. So I would assume that that'd be that given what they did, or I guess didn't do this offseason, that's the approach that they'll probably be taking with this group. That puts a lot of pressure on them, where you're blocking for a potentially a rookie quarterback, or at the very least a guy who was a bit of a bust in his previous stop. Where I think that there will be a decent amount of pressure on them too, because if those guys don't blossom in the way that that organization hopes they do, I mean that affects everything. Like you can't have a good run game, so you
Right,
have a
right,
first round
yeah.
pick in Najee Harris, who's effectively moot at that point. And Trubisky
I
and Pickett
think
are
both
both
lines of
mobile
scrimmage, Craig, and
guys.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I think both lines
Well,
of
that's fine.
scrimmage are the most important thing in football. I mean, if you can't control both lines of scrimmage, Craig, you're going to have major problems. And it was a problem for the Steelers last year, and I felt bad for Cam Hayward because him and T.J. Watt had to do all the work last year. And there were a few guys that pitched in here and there, but what I'm saying is the bulk of the tackling was done by them, and if they got hurt, we were in trouble. And that's just a major issue there. And then on the offensive line, it was all this rotating in and out. They were young, but if there was any other quarterback in there, Craig, do you think we would have had a terrible year other than Ben being there with this offensive line?
Um, I think that they would have maybe been a little bit better. Just really couldn't make plays with his feet. I mean, maybe this is just because I haven't watched enough Chicago Bears football over the past few seasons, but I mean, given what Ben was last season, I think that Trubisky and Pickett are both upgrades over him. I mean, it's just, which sounds blasphemous to say, but it was just the 2021 version of Ben Roethlisberger was not the, I'll say 2004 through, 2019 version of him. So, I think that with him being gone and the pieces that they have now, they have upgraded there, albeit I think pretty marginally. That obviously depends upon what Pickett is able to do right away for them. But yeah, I mean, given what you have there with those quarterbacks and with that, and with a first round running back who I think's a stud. I think once he plays behind a better line, I think that's going to be a really, really, really good, really impactful player for them. But if you can't get guys blocking for him, those weapons are only
It's
so
a waste of
useful.
time. It's yeah, exactly, exactly. My next question is, and then we're going to go into some Pirates and Penguins a little bit here. My last question to you is: do you think how do you think Mike Tomlin? You think Mike Tomlin can adjust because he's had 15 years. He walked into a situation where he had a franchise quarterback, went to a Super Bowl and won it. Okay, now he doesn't have that luxury. Do you? What do you think he? How do you think he's going to be able to? How do you think it's going to work for Mike Tomlin?
He's kind of a guy too that I talked about giving, about there being sort of an organizational benefit of the doubt. He's a guy that for all he inherited when he first got that job, I guess it was in 2007. He's a guy who's accomplished a lot there. He took over a good situation, but they were a playoff team last season in 2021, so that's 14 years after he was first hired, and he did that with a team that really wasn't very good. I thought that was a group that certainly overachieved just to get to the playoffs. So he's a guy who I have a lot of trust in. I mean, they're very outside of really Belichick and Andy Reid, there are very few coaches that I would put above Tomlin as far as guys I'm just really who I'm really enamored with and I think are among the best coaches in the sport. You know, you can maybe throw Sean McVay in there now that he has a Super Bowl ring. But Tomlin's someone who just with what he's been able to accomplish. I know that the playoff record here over the past, gosh, almost the past decade now has not been good. But
Right.
he's still someone who, you know, I trust him more than I trust probably at least 75-80% of the head coaches in the NFL. So I think it will be a reasonably smooth transition with him at the helm.
Juana says, great show. Thanks for all the information that you've given Craig. And he said that she says you're wonderful. So just want to let you know the comment section here. You can comment as
Glad
well.
someone
Put your
besides my mom
comments in the
thinks that.
section. There you go. There you go. Um, let's talk a little bit about the Pirates. What's your thoughts on the team this year? Do you think they're going to do better? Do you think they're going to do the same? Or do you think they're going to do kind of in between?
I mean, they just lost to the Reds, so I mean, I think right now, like this is a team that
Yeah,
I
they
think
just
is
got
going to
blown
be.
out tonight, 11-1. So
Yeah,
by the
I think it's going to be
Dodgers.
a season here, and it's crazy too. Like when I moved to Pittsburgh, it was in 2012, so they were kind of on the upswing, and being there for those 3 seasons where they made the playoffs, like that's as engaged and energized as I've seen Pittsburgh as a sports town in the decade that I lived there. So um, it's really sad to see kind of how things have fallen apart a bit here. I do have to say though, my Pirates expertise and certainly with the Penguins too is very limited. I only keep
That's
up
fine. I
with it so
understand.
much,
No
so I
problem.
think this might be the point where I probably have to bounce off the call here. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I can complain about the Pirates with the best of them, complain about Bob nutting and everything that's kind of gone wrong there and just how they don't really seem financially committed to winning. Um, but yeah, as far as a lot of the nuances, I'm not very good at it. So I think this might have to be the point, where I
There you go.
hop off tonight.
That's fine, Craig. Craig, thank you for being part of the show. I'll have you come back on again another time, talk some stuff, and also don't forget I have a TV show as well on PCTV. May have you come on there as well. So thank you for being on here, Craig. Have a great night. Thank you for your information, and have yourself a great night and be safe.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate you all having me on here. And yeah, no, appreciate you having me on here.
All right. How can anyone get a hold of you that wants to get a hold of you for anything through the Post Gazette?
Yeah, my email is probably the best way. That is C as in cat, MEYER at post-gazette.com, Gazette with 2 T's. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me. You can also, hit me up on Twitter. My DMs are open. That is at Craig Meyer PG.
Great, Craig. Thank you very much. Be safe. Say hello to Paul Zeiss for me, will you?
Will do. Will do.
All
Thank you.
right. Thank you. Have a great one. Thanks for being on. That was Craig Meyer from the Post Gazette, who was just on to talk with us about Pitt Athletics. And now we're going to continue on the show. We talked a little bit with him also about the Steelers. I want your thoughts here in the comments section. What do you think about the Steelers, Pirates, Penguins, Riverhounds? Anything you want to talk about? The Pirates lost tonight 11-1 to the Dodgers. I think this team's going to be probably another 62 loss or win season and 100 losses. But what I'm upset about this whole situation is how the Lawrence Knapp situation was handled. I was just on a show before tonight, before we started, Sports Corner called 108 Stitches. And Scott Morganroth invited me on, and it was great to be on with him and his friends. And we were on there tonight. We're talking about baseball. We're talking about small market teams, teams that are winning, things like that. But here's what I'm upset about. I'm angry because Lawrence Knapp got thrown out of the game the other day, and I didn't see anything happening from Derek Sheldon. I mean, I know Don Kelly went up to him and told him he needed to, be quiet, and then all of a sudden, here comes Derek Sheldon, and the umpire throws him out. And then what happens is you end up losing Roberto Perez, and then you had to go to a third string catcher. Okay? Are we back to this again, Derek Sheldon? We're back to a dugout that's out of control. All right? Because the way I'm looking at this right now, We have an out of control dugout, and if you're going to do the same thing you did last year when you were all making fun of that kid, that guy that was pitching 30 miles an hour, and I'm off the top of my head, I can't remember who that was, but I know that that did happen. And it's not funny that that kid was pitching 30 miles an hour. My friend Claudio Rosano had even mentioned that as well, and he's a baseball kind of guy, manager at Carnegie Mellon University baseball team for 17 years. He's won some championships there. And he told me this, he says, that dugout situation last year was terrible. And I think the Lawrence Knapp situation is too. I think Derek Sheldon needs to get better control, or Don Kelly, the bench coach, needs to get a little better control of the dugout. And, kind of tell some of these guys, you got to quiet down. The Pirates cannot afford to do the following. They cannot afford to lose players. They cannot afford to make mistakes. They cannot do these things, everybody, because if they do, they're not going to win games. I've said this many times, and the Pirates are just, if it's going to be a continuous situation where they're going to do this, I think it's time to take a look at another manager after the next season, because actually you have to give Derek Sheldon at least one full season to see what he can do, because he's only had 2 part-time seasons with COVID. He didn't have any kind of fans in the stands. He didn't have any type of ability to really put the team together. Now this year again, here was another obstacle. We had the lockout. And the lockout really hurt the Pirates this year because they needed all the spring training time that they could get to get this team in order. Plus, you have new players. You have players you've sent out. You have players that you have that are here that have never been here before, like the Roberto Perez's, the Lawrence Knapps. They need to get familiar with pitching. New players need Vogelbach. They need to get familiar with the team as well, and things like that. And now you're playing the shuffle game, shuffling players around because you have injuries, and then you have 2 of your best players in Brian Hayes, and Brian Reynolds not hitting the ball. Now Brian Reynolds all of a sudden has come up, but he had a big slump. Guys like that can't afford to have a slump. Guys like Hayes can't afford to have a slump. Okay? I've said this many times. And when you lose to the Cincinnati Reds, and which in my opinion is unacceptable, to a team that I think Carnegie Mellon could beat, okay? Carnegie Mellon University and Coach Claudio Rosano could beat the Cincinnati Reds better than the Pirates could. The Pirates were able to salvage 1 game out of those 4 games, and I thought that was disgusting because they didn't play very well. Derek Sheldon has to get this team together. He has to get them playing better. He has to get them learning better. And now with Roberto Perez out, you have Lawrence Knapp in there. And I heard that they're bringing up former number 1 draft pick Henry Davis to fill in the catching void. Mike Perez has been around this team for a while. He can't hit. Okay, so it's no use having him up. Lawrence Knapp does what he can. Okay, so now you have Henry Davis coming up, and let's see what Henry Davis does. It took Jason Kendall a while when he was the number 1 pick to get acclimated to everything. But the difference between Kendall and some of these guys is that Kendall was with us for a while. He was a consistent hitter, a consistent fielder, and a consistent leader. We need to have leaders on this team. We need to have guys that can lead the team. And what I thought they should have done was they should have kept Colin Moran. He went to the Reds for $1 million. We could have kept him, used him at third and first, spell off Hayes a little bit. Vogelbach was here as a DH. We could have kept him as a DH, used Tijuana or whatever his name is there at first base, and then you put your, and then you put Vogelbach, and then you have, and then Moran. And Moran can play some different positions on the infield. All right. Then now we have to bring up rookies, and we have to bring guys up from the minors that probably need some time down there to get acclimated to the speed of the game. And that's exactly what's going on right now with the Pirates. All right, this is Ralph Williams. We're in 808 Studios in Allentown section of the city of Pittsburgh. And earlier this evening, I was on a baseball show. I want to thank Scott Morganroth of the South Florida Tribune for having me on as a guest on 108 Stitches, which is one of his baseball shows. And it's great. Scott does a lot. He has a lot of shows, on different platforms, including Blog Talk Radio like myself. Don't forget tomorrow, 4:30 p.m., start time Maulers talk. We're going to talk about the disgusting 24-0 loss that the Maulers encountered this past week against the Michigan Panthers. So I thought it was a disgusting game. I thought that they should have won a little bit better or played a little bit better. And I'm sorry, they played the New Jersey Generals. I thought they could have played a little bit of a better game. They got beaten at both lines of scrimmage. We'll talk about that again tomorrow, and about my feelings about Kirby Wilson. You know how that goes, especially about the pizza incident. And the Penguins, they play tomorrow night. They're in the middle of this series with the Rangers. Now, my next question to you in the comments section is wide open. Do you think the Penguins can win with Louis Dominique, or Dominic, or whatever they call him, or Da Vinci, or the Da Vinci Code, whatever they're calling him? Anyway, do you think they can win with Louis? That's my question. All right, we have comment section. Sad for the Maulers. Yes, indeed. They are sad. They're 0-4 at this time. You can put your comments in the comments section, and we're blowing up tonight, and that's great because I like when everyone responds in the comments section. Here, I'm Sports Corner. This is Ralph Williams, and we're on YouTube and Facebook. Look at the ticket take at the bottom. Don't forget about my other shows, Mauler Talk, tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. every Wednesday. Thursday, 8 p.m., Blog Talk Radio, 347-205-9631. It's Wrestle Talk with myself and Mark Mancini. I want you to write this down or put it in your phone or whatever, because every other Thursday we do Wrestle Talk, and we also do the Pittsburgh, or the Black and Gold Pittsburgh podcast. We do that, Mark Mancini and myself. And we once in a while we have my good friend and co-host from Sports Corner, Smoking Jim Frazier, on as well. So what I'm saying to you is, don't forget to please mark down all my shows. Also, Sports Corner can be seen on Saturday at 5 p.m. on PCTV Channel 21, Comcast 47, Verizon Cable, and also on PCTV's Facebook page. You can catch it as well. Check local listings. Make sure that it's on at the right time and which episode will be on as well. Also, don't forget about my live call-in show every first Thursday of the month, and my taping of The Way I See It, which will be live on Facebook, on PCTV's Facebook page. Also, don't forget every Friday at 7 o'clock. But this Friday, we're going to be on at 8 o'clock because I have a prior obligation before that. The Way I See It. And let me tell you what, every single week, The Way I See It gets better and better and better. This week, we have some deep topics to talk about, and I mean deep. Due to the fact that I canceled my shows on Sunday, we're going to have blast now on Friday night, and I have some people I want to blast anyway. Bonehead, don't forget. And now I brought back, which was a segment of the show that I keep, that I didn't have really time to put in there. But this week we're going to put it in, and we're going to put it in every week. It's called Something to Think About. All right, we're bringing that back into the show. I'm going to give you something to think about. All right, I'll have a topic, and also your comments are always welcome. We're on both platforms, YouTube and Facebook, as you see it on the below me there on the ticket take. Getting back to the Penguins, they came out gritty in the last few games. And they really have come around in the playoffs against the Rangers. The good thing about the Penguins compared to the Rangers is we have a lot more experienced players. They've been there. They've been to the playoffs. The Rangers are sort of a young team. They have some experience, but they don't have a lot. They have a coach who really is, he's got some talent. He's molded it together. But what I think the Penguins could do, and I didn't think they'd make it past the first round. And I'm going to say this. If they make it past the first round of the playoffs, when I do my next episode of Sports Corner live call-in show in June, I will wear a bag over my face, over my head, because I was the one that said they were going to fail. All right? If they win this next game tomorrow night, the June live call-in show with my with my co-host Smoking Jim Frazier, I will wear a bag over my head, paper bag, because I'm embarrassed of the fact that I even made that kind of a statement because I did not think that with this situation, the way it has gone, with the goalies and the injuries and slow starts and slow scoring goals by some of our key players, I didn't think the Penguins were even going to make it this far. All right. So I'm embarrassed by it, and if it happens, I will do what my other media colleagues, of my media colleagues, except for my friends maybe, will not do, and that's admit they're wrong. Okay, they will admit that they will not ever admit they're wrong. When I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But when I'm right, I will tell you that I'm right. Okay, I was wrong about the draft. I thought the Steelers were going to go in offensive line, stack up the lines of scrimmage so we could mow everybody over. But instead, they let Baltimore do it. Okay? So I was wrong on that. All right? But at least I admit that I was wrong. Okay? Am I wrong about what this draft is? That it's a bust, except for Kenny Pickett? We're going to find out. I don't think it's a complete bust, but I'm not sold on what we have right now until we see what happens. The draft is like gambling in Vegas and throwing dice down at the craps table or pulling the lever down on a slot machine. Okay. And some other sporting news here in the NFL. Yeah, here we go. Tom Brady, the greedy pig as he is, has decided to sign a contract for 10 years, $325 million to Fox. When he retires, he's going to be a announcer or a sports commentator or some kind of something for Fox, and he's going to make $10 million. And of course, he's greedy, just like he's greedy with the situation with his rings. He has 7, but he wants 10. Okay, and that's one topic Friday night for the way I see it. I wasn't going to give you any kind of carrots right now because I want you to tune into the show. What I am going to tell you is this: one of the topics that we are going to talk about, and I told you this just a few minutes ago. I have some deep topics, and I'm going to give you one of them: greed. We're going to talk about greed for a minute here, okay? The reason we're going to talk about greed is because I'm tired of the greed. I am, okay? And don't go by this notion because it's a movie from Wall Street that greed is good, okay? All right? We're going to talk about greed and a lot more Friday, 8 p.m. Don't forget the way I see it. Don't forget Thursday night, 8 p.m. Blog Talk Radio Wrestle Talk with myself and Mark Mancini. We have the national Wrestle Talk show in the entire nation. Okay, we are peaking. We are peaking with the listeners. You can tune in by dialing 347-205-9631. Don't forget Thursday night, 8 p.m. start time. We're always on time at 8 o'clock. Myself, Mark Mancini, Blog Talk Radio, National Wrestle Talk. We'll talk about this week's WrestleMania Backlash. We'll get your thoughts and your comments as usual. And Juana says, deep topics, greed. Yes, it is. That's right. Friday, I will have some deep topics, and I believe that I will set the standard that this will probably be my best, the way I see it, that I've ever put out, because I'm going into some topics that you're not going to believe. Okay? And I have a lot to talk about on Friday, plenty. My life story, and I have a lot of things to talk about. So I need tune in Friday night at 8 o'clock. Forget everything else. Tune in at 8 on Friday. I would be on at 7 o'clock, but I have a previous engagement that I have to be at. But I will be able to be on the air at 8 o'clock and make it for the way I see it. So don't forget about that. Don't forget Saturday, PCTV channel 21 Comcast, 47 Verizon, the TV version of Sports Corner with myself and Smoke and Jim Frazier. Don't forget about that as well. And also don't forget about 4 o'clock on Saturday, the Boxing Authorities, Claudio Rosano, Smoke and Jim Frazier, my co-host of Sports Corner. He's also the co-host of that show, and also Luther Dupree. And don't forget about their Steel City Sports World show, Saturday at 6 p.m. My good friends, the three of them, the three best guys you could ever meet, Luther Dupree, Claudio Rosano, and Smoke and Jim Frazier as well. on Saturday. A big smorgasbord of sports for you. And don't forget about the Maulers. We will talk about Maulers Talk. I'll have you what time game, what network, what everything about the USFL and the Maulers tomorrow at 4:30 live YouTube and Facebook. I am Ralph Williams. This has been Sports Corner. I want to say good night and be safe. Thanks for watching.